Welcome to the Heart Rate Variability Podcast, where we explore the exciting science behind heart rate variability. The material discussed in this podcast should not be taken as medical advice. Please check with your medical provider to make sure any suggestions or strategies are right for you. Visit us at the OptimalHRV.com website to learn more about the Optimal HRV app, download a free copy of Matt's book, Heart Rate Variability, and also get show notes and additional resources around heart rate variability and its applications. Welcome, friends, to the Heart Rate Variability Podcast. I am Matt. I am here with the doctors today. I got Dr. Dave Hopper, Dr. Ina Hazan, who I can call co-authors, which is really exciting for us to, I guess, officially announce a book we published a few weeks back now. I want to hold it up for our YouTube fans. The Heartbeat of Business is out there in the world. So I'm really excited to announce this. I've been feeling like I've been delaying gratification every podcast we've recorded by not throwing this out into the world. So I'm excited to talk a little bit about some of the key concepts with both of you as we went on this journey together. And so I'll give a little bit of history about the really strategic decision-making process that led us to start this project. And this was kind of came out organically. And when I say strategic, it was nowhere close to that. When I wrote the book around heart rate variability and trauma-informed organizations, one of the interesting things is a lot of healthcare, social services, mental health organizations really had to shift during the pandemic to just surviving it. We started to get contacted by a lot of folks in the more traditional business world, the for-profit world, sort of asking us is, hey, we picked up your therapy book. What do you think about bringing this into the business environment? And you don't have to ask me a question more than probably twice without me jumping to a solution for it. Sometimes probably should think about that before, but this is the big strategy is, I remember we were on a call. I think it was just Ina and Jeff and I were on a call. I was like, should I write a book for business leaders on this? The answer was yes. And then I asked Ina, you want to write this with me? And she said, sure. And then I reached out to Dave. Dave, you want to write a book? And Dave's like, hell yeah, I want to write a book with this. So I'm excited, actually, now that it's in the world to actually talk about it. So, Ina, let me start with you with just kind of more how you kind of thought about this and approached this project about, let's talk about tracking heart rate variability first. In a time where burnout is off the charts, we know that's universal at this point. Mental health crisis we hear every day about. I just have to mention that we're recording this the day after the horrific shooting, another horrific shooting, this time in a Texas elementary school. With this, monkeypox is floating around. I'm not sure what that is, but it sounds really scary. So, I mean, all this impacts business leaders as well. So I just like to kind of throw the large question out to you, because I know you've worked with businesses, even like the military, who obviously deal with trauma, post-traumatic growth a lot too. So when you think about HRV tracking in the business world, I guess what sort of informs your thinking around that?
That's a really good question. And, framing this in the context of all this scary stuff going on in the world. And we've had way more than our fair share recently. There's just been way too much traumatic, scary stuff going on. And I think, applying this idea of, we need to keep an eye on how we're doing. I think that's generally been accepted in a more clinical situations, like, for medical patients, the doctors track how they're doing with measuring their heart rate and, getting their blood work done and kind of keeping an eye on them. In mental health situations, when we're meeting weekly with clients, we do a check-in, hey, how are things going? How are you managing things? And guess what? Business leaders are human. Although sometimes they may not always admit to it and sometimes don't appear to be, but they are. And there is very much a need of keeping an eye on, how are they doing? Heart rate variability tracking gives you that objective way of doing it. And the beautiful thing is that it's simple. It's not time consuming. And it has been shown over and over again in research that this is absolutely the way to track how is your nervous system handling that load of everything that's going on, the stuff that's going on with the business, the stuff that's going on in the world, the stuff that's going on in the family, and, everything else that may be happening for any individual human. So this is just a really surprisingly simple and accurate and effective way of flagging, like, hey, maybe today you need a little bit of extra self-care, or, maybe today you can take on a little bit of extra stuff, and maybe you can tackle some of those projects that have been, lying around in your back pocket. So HRV is a really versatile and a valuable way of adding to your toolkit of maintaining a good business head.
Absolutely. Dave, I think if I'm not wrong, you're probably running I know both Ina and I are running small businesses. Obviously, Optimal is a small business. I know you've got, I don't know how many clinics, honestly, you have at this point. I try to support you every time you open a new one. But I know you've got a lot of balls in the air as well and fall into that business leader category. But I would just love to hear, as an expert on heart rate variability, the stress response, as we've talked about for many episodes. I'd just like to kind of, especially with the HRV tracking piece of this, just kind of how you look at this. And I know we had to organize ourselves really strategically as we put this down into book form. So just love to get your insights on the tracking piece.
So I mean, hit it right on the head, but how I look at it is always, if you have a nervous system, you should probably be tracking your HRV, because it's gonna give you some useful insight. And when we look at things, like Ina had mentioned, today might be a good day or a good day to take things on, or today might not be. It's the power of when, and actually that's a book about sleep. But if we look at that in the context of HRV, it really does help you decide, okay, I'm noticing these trends about myself that, the beginning of the week is my time to shine, or the end of the week is my time to shine. We all have different times that are typically going to show as our best time and our best performance, not only within each day, but within each week and even within each month. And if you're tracking HRV regularly, you can see that, and then you can act on those things and use that to the best of your ability. Place those big important meetings when you are at your best, rather than saying, I'm just going to take this meeting because I have time right here, and your HRV is in the tank, and that every Friday is your worst your worst mental performance of the week. Why would you take a big meeting on that day then?
Yeah.
You can strategically plan your life as a result of that. And as far as it goes with managing employees, that's another huge thing too, is you can use this exact same power with them. Use it to your advantage. When you have to interact with people, make that in your employees' best times of their day or their best times of their week, when they just have to do notes, right? The quote unquote less important things. That doesn't take nearly as much power. So put that at a part of your day when it doesn't matter as much. When you don't need all of that interaction power, that you would when somebody's right in front of your face. Put that at a time of the week where it's not as impactful. So that's a great way to look at it. I love using it in that lens. But yeah.
Love it. And I just, my thought and where I really quickly saw the potential benefit, especially as we like creating the dashboard of tracking team health, tracking organizational health, like, and I will probably mention at sometime through here, I have my favorite assessments, but one of the things that, whether it is employee engagement, satisfaction, that if you did one of those maybe every 6 months, that was a lot. Like, those are almost annual sort of evaluations. And there's ways you can do more kind of, but it was, I didn't really see anything until I started to think about like the dashboard measuring group health of a way that we could really answer the question, how's my team doing today? How's my organization doing today? So one of the things that I found really interesting, and I know you've worked with some like athletic teams and stuff over the years as well, is like we sort of get, and I never have encouraged anybody to throw out their surveys. Don't do that. This doesn't replace those, but you could wake up in the morning if you got everybody, and again, we there's a confidentiality piece for these that we work with organizations on. But here's how my team is doing today, that collective HRV score. So I think one thing we don't talk a lot about in the peer-reviewed journals with heart rate variability is that sort of group wellness score. And, I wonder, as you think about like from the group health perspective, just kind of how HRV can help inform leaders and how that might be connected with their team's performance if heart rate variability is high or low.
Yeah, absolutely. Very much along the lines of what Dave was saying with strategic planning. You can use that for your own individual, planning. You can use it for for planning for your team, whether it be an athletic team or a corporate team. Even evaluating things like, how are people doing, throughout the day, with meetings. Yeah. One of the more frequent issues that come up with, lots of organizations is people feel like they're constantly being pulled into meetings, whether they need to be in those meetings or not, that they don't have time to do their actual work. Yeah. Right. And, let's say, you want to do something about that. You want to restructure some things. You want to change up how the day is doing. HRV is a really good way to see how is your team responding to that. Get a baseline measurement of how things are going before you implement any changes, and then have people continue tracking their HRV through the change and for a few weeks after, and see what happens. Are people's nervous systems responding well to the changes that you are implementing? Same thing with planning for when are people at their most productive. Let's say you want to do a brainstorming session. Let's say you want to have a bunch of people throwing out their best ideas. It may be fairly obvious that Friday afternoon is not the best time for that. But what time is, right? It's a really good way to tell is to look at your team autonomic nervous system functioning throughout the week, and see what's happening. You might even ask people to take a couple of readings through the day. Whether or not everybody will be able to do that, I don't know. But let's say 2-3 minute readings, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, and see how people are doing, and make plans that way. Because every team is going to be different. I think many people believe that doing important things first thing in the morning is generally a good idea. But, there's some people are morning people, some people are not. Some people really are at their best in the afternoon. And this is a really good way to get to know your particular team so that you're not trying to apply a one size fits all kind of rule to a unique team composed of, individual people with individual needs. If you get that tracking, you'll see, well, are most people on your team morning people, or are they afternoon people? Do you want to pull some of those people into an important meeting in the morning and some of them in the afternoon, depending on when they're going to be at their best?
Absolutely. I have like two just examples of that. Dave, I'd love to see if you had any of these kind of aha moments as well. One of the reasons I love writing a book, because you got to think about things differently. Even though like I do podcasts, I do trainings, like I never shut up. Putting something down in paper forces you to say, okay, do I have really good data behind this thing I'm saying? And then go reference it, go find the research and always adjust it. Like the one thing that I really hope HRV can be utilized as is what's your state? In other words, your short-term mental, cognitive, emotional health. When you're walking into a meeting, I envision at some point you have like this red, yellow, green little thing that you can put up. That, hey, I might be in red today. Doesn't mean you can't expect me to be a decent human being to this. But if I'm just struggling a little bit, just know that that's where I'm at. And maybe we check in with the red folks and see if they need anything from us to support them. Maybe I just got a bad night of sleep. And hey, if I'm not 100%, you know why, instead of me just pissing everybody off. Yeah, Matt might be a little cranky today because he only got like 5 hours of sleep instead of what he needs. And so, I really see that this can be this really practical tool ripe for innovation. The other thing, that I really have applied to my own as in this research is the hour lunch break. I've always been someone who's like, I'd rather end an hour early than take a freaking hour in the middle. And I love my work, but I also love what I do after work as well. So, but the research that I found specifically on heart rate variability, that a lot of people, what they found, the majority of people, if they take that hour break, their heart rate variability after that break is actually higher than it was pre-work. And I'm like, okay, I can't ignore that, right? And then I did my N of one is, how's this apply to Matt? And I'll tell you, the last couple hours of my day now are way more productive than they used to be as well. So even like going through this as the experts, found ways to really put this to work for myself. Dave, I kind of wonder what insights you kind of came out of this process with.
So, well, a couple of things, and if I can just comment right on what you had just said, there is the importance of doing exactly what you did, testing yourself as an N of one, because everything is so unique to each of us, how we perceive each thing, how each thing is going to affect us, that you can't just say, this is generally what will work for you, right? It's going to be different for every single person. And granted, taking an hour long lunch, nobody's going to argue with that necessarily, but it is important to test all these various things on yourself to make sure that, yes, this actually is good for me, not just taking it and saying, okay, well, this is supposed to be good for me, but I hate it. Right. So yeah, always testing. And then as far as what I took from this, there's just too much. Getting to work with, well, first of all, I think everybody listening knows that Matt has an MBA and knows way more about business than most. So reading through the section of your book that you wrote, people will ask me about the book, and I'll go, there's like a lot of stuff in there that I don't understand at all. I didn't write any of that. All that business talk. So I learned a ton through that, which was really cool. And then every time that the three of us get together and chat, I learn more about myself. I learn more about HRV. I learn more about the applications of HRV. So it is, it was just such a cool process, like you were saying, Matt. But I did want to go back, and as well, what Ina had said about, about business leaders becoming, almost inhuman, too, is that how we all become a little bit jaded to the loads that we are carrying. Mm-hmm. And as a business leader, especially, you become jaded to that, because, what used to be a big deal is now something that just happens every day, right? And even though it's not a big deal anymore to you because it's a regular thing, doesn't mean that it's not a big deal anymore, right? Like we just had a therapist quit yesterday, and we go, whatever. Yeah. Another day, right? But how much does that impact you? Because now, how much do you have to go back and fill in all of these things, X, Y, Z, and that's what HRV is another great thing for too, is pointing out, what, you might not have thought that was a big deal because this has just become, quote unquote, normal for you. But look at what that did to your nervous system. Look at the impact that actually had on you. So that's another big thing that I wanted to make sure that I mentioned, and I'm sorry if I missed some of that
No,
question
that's
in there too.
great. And the other thing that, I really, where HRV sort of came into my thinking at the perfect time is, with the, and if we're honest, the healthcare profession, social services, education, we were pretty much a mess going into the pandemic, but now we're in a crisis in the fields that I've worked most with overall. And really, as I look for models, it was like the job demands and resources model, which dominates a lot of our how we challenge leaders to think, because it's just one of those best practices, well established in the research models out there. But where HRV really came in for me is that the real connection between burnout and outcomes, because there's been a mentality that maybe we're getting away from. I don't know. I'm not that hopeful. If you're not burned out, you must not be working hard enough. That sort of mentality in our, especially American culture, is, just work yourself into the ground, or there's something wrong with you. And this is where I'm seeing pushback on the idea of self-care. It's like, well, if you're not healthy, you must be doing something wrong. Well, my workload is too much and my team is incredibly dysfunctional, and we don't factor any of that into the equation. So it really challenges leaders to say, how do I position the resources, including my relation with folks, to help offset the stress or distress, in our terms, the negative stress inherent to the work? And I think it's that real challenge of, if we fail at that, if we as an organization, if our staff are not doing a good job, as measured by heart rate variability really well, what do we need to do different? Because that connection between cognitive health, do you need your people to be smart at work? Emotional and relational health, do you need people to relate with other people? And then obviously the cost of medical health as well, looking at how do we manage that. So yeah, I think it really sets the challenge. And then HRV just gives us data on how we're doing helping people regulate that stress response, which to me is just really exciting with that. So Ina, speaking about resources, I want to talk about now kind of shifting into helping people perform their best at their work, utilizing a resource that we have really worked hard to make very inexpensive here at Optimal. A very cheap thing compared to a lot of other things you do, like insurance and that, about heart rate variability, biofeedback, and mindfulness. So when you, I know, approach people to help them perform at their best, regardless of their environment, how do you sort of bring heart rate variability, biofeedback, and mindfulness? How do you position that for peak performance?
Really good question, Matt. The best way that I can that I think about it and explain it to people is, we put a lot of effort, or organization may put a lot of effort and a lot of money into improving efficiency, into improving employee well-being. Hopefully, the two are very highly correlated, as we know. But then, how do we know whether all of these efforts are paying off? Right? It's kind of like we're flying blind, including things like mindfulness interventions. Yes, we know they work. They generally work. Research shows that they work. But how do we know how this is translating into your organization? How do you know what all the changes that you're making translating into the organization? It's kind of like you're in a cockpit of an airplane and it's pitch black outside, and you don't really know what's going on. So heart rate variability tracking and heart rate variability biofeedback gives you a way of looking inside each individual person, and looking inside your team and your organization, and gives you a way of no longer flying blind. You have a way of knowing how are these interventions working, and very importantly, you now have a way of actually looking at heart rate variability as its own resource. Yes. This is one of those wonderful things that works as a measurement and as a way of tracking. It's a biomarker. But heart rate variability in itself is something that we can improve. And we can do that through HRV biofeedback. And just like HRV tracking, HRV biofeedback is fairly easily accessible and much more easily done than some of the other interventions that we might turn to. This is 20 minutes a day of practicing your resonance frequency breathing. And for the most part, it's sort of a nice time of the day, right? You don't have to exert yourself a whole lot. You don't have to do things that are terribly difficult. You sit and you breathe. And we know it works. Resonance frequency breathing increases your heart rate variability long term, right? It increases your HRV in the process of doing the training. But then, once you've done your 20 minutes, your HRV is going to go back down. That's normal. It's going to go quite high during the training, and it's going to go back down. But as you do your daily 20 minutes, 4, 5, 6 weeks into it, you'll see your baseline HRV overall coming up. Right?
Yeah.
And that kind of data is gold, right? You can see that what you are doing is paying off, and something that you can do in as little as 20 minutes a day without huge amount of work or exertion is going to increase your HRV, and that it's going to add to your own individual resilience. It's going to add to the resilience and the adaptability of the team and of the whole organization. When you're adding mindfulness to that, you are feeding two birds with one bagel. Where you're implementing two interventions, one kind of more top down, the other one more bottom up. They're both aimed at the same goal of improving resilience and self-regulation. And you can now do both together. So, you can do your 20 minutes a day. You don't have to do 20 minutes of HRV training and 20 minutes of mindfulness because, well, that's probably not going to happen, realistically speaking. You can now bring the two together, with the optimal app. Makes it fairly simple. You're getting the best of both worlds.
Yeah, and I mean, the impact you've had on my life, Ina, like I wasn't, and I've been practicing mindfulness before I met you, probably about 13 plus years. So that has had a huge impact. But as I started practicing HRV biofeedback, and there were some other things. I had like a summer of recovery and some other things as well. But that was the big change that I made in my life. It doubled my daily average, which statistically, as I like to brag about, I have the HRV of a preteen girl, which they are the highest HRV people I think we've measured. So there's nothing gross about that. I'm just competing against that baseline as I want to beat the highest category, and that just happens to kind of be preteen girls. So, it's my competition right now, but it was amazing to watch a doubling of my average. And I just like to think about anybody out there, whether you think about yourself or your business. I'm not saying I've doubled my cognitive capacity. I don't think, but I'm more resilient. My stress response, I mean, I can feel it. My ability to get regulated and stay regulated throughout the day is huge. And it's almost like my biofeedback practice is my pregame warm-up. And I'm starting to challenge folks is, I didn't have to take pregame warm-up was part of my investment in the team. Right. And so as business leaders, can we give people 20 minutes to get warmed up to perform at their best? And is that a worthy investment? And I know as my N of one, the answer is absolutely yes. And if you want to look at Ina's and others' research, it just reinforces that at more of a population level as well. So Dave, I'd love to get your thoughts on the integration of HRV biofeedback as one of those resources that we talk a lot about in the book.
Yes, absolutely. And yes, indeed, Matt, you're just crushing those preteen girls. You're taking them down.
With my HRV scores.
With your HRV
yes,
scores.
Just in that one category. Yes.
And you know, I had a very similar experience to you, where I had been mindfulness meditation was something that I would do every single day, and now adding this in, it has indeed been a huge game changer. Just as simple as paying attention to the way that you're breathing, right, during that time, and it's so cool how powerful that can be. So it's a very similar experience, although you know, I can't claim that my HRV is quite as high as yours.
I don't know.
But
You're my second competition, I think. So it's you and those preteen girls are who I'm shooting to beat. So
yes, but yeah, no, indeed, I have seen some great changes, and using this with patients too has been very powerful to start to suggest this to them. I don't get to practice this nearly as much as Ina does, as this is exactly what Ina does. But it's been a great tool, a great suggestion that I can help patients out with, and say, hey, these are the things that you're struggling with. Well, you know, I know that if you use this application, and that if you try, because you're already doing your HRV every day, right? And a lot of these people are already meditating every day. Let's just do that resonance frequency assessment, right? It's going to take you 14 minutes. And then once you're done with that, you have your breathing rate. And now let's get into using that for doing the training. And it is pretty cool that that just with the simple use of the app, that these people are seeing, you know, a pretty profound change. Now, I wish I could get my wife to start to do this as well, because she is she's a business leader who refuses to take a break, and she won't even take her HRV, which I think, you know, as we've talked about, is kind of a sign in itself. She won't be listening to this, right?
I do have a motivational interviewing book out there too, Dave, called Connected Paradigms. If you need to help someone in your life find a little motivation for positive change, just let you know that's out there as well.
Yes, yeah. No, but that
shameless plug.
Yes, those bigger picture connections that we can get with using that resonance frequency breathing is just amazing. And you know, I know, you know, listening to you talk at conferences, I've heard about some of the amazing things that you've had that you've found with patients too, and that's just phenomenal. And then the business leaders. So yeah,
awesome. You know, one of the things, David, your wife gives us a great example that I'll not talk about your wife, who I haven't met yet, but good luck with that and getting her. I have similar challenges. Oh, you just got to wake up 20 minutes early, and I get a look and often a pillow thrown at me. But you know, we're hitting this point, I think. And Ina, I'd love to get your perspective of who you work with as well. You know, it's like, we know mindfulness works. And now we're putting, like, in, for lack of a better analogy, because I know this one's not perfect, like, I feel like, and I think the science backs up the bad analogy I have of this, is like, you know, breathing at your resonant frequency breathing rate is like mindfulness on steroids. I need a better analogy. I know I need a better analogy, but it just like takes my mindfulness practice and just like, again, I just get so much more benefit, which I can measure with heart rate variability. And yet, like, all these like maybe not high performing, maybe they're just burned out, but like, so many people just continue to come up with excuses why not to practice mindfulness. Like, it is the most amazing thing that I have seen, is even folks who are in, you know, get the science that we get are like, oh, I know I should, but I don't. And I'm hoping that we have the data to say, nope, you need to sit on your butt. You need to figure out what your RF breathing rate is, and you need to freaking practice. So I want to sort of end up, you know, let's go with Ina first on this question, then we'll go with Dave. Is we're in a crisis right now, and I hope that when some folks might find this a year or two from now, everything is wonderful in the world. But, you know, with leaders I talk to, turnover rates, keeping employees, having to pay signing bonuses for positions we never thought, but maybe should have thought about paying signing bonuses for, that there is just a growing crisis that we're measuring, but I almost think society and business leaders don't have the capacity themselves to really sit back and understand what's going on. And we're seeing, I think we're just going to see an eroding of outcomes and, stock prices eventually if we don't get a hold of this. So I would love to, you can kind of speak from your expertise here, as knowing so many people are struggling with the mental health, the engagement of their workforce. Just some suggestions, that you might have for them. How to sort of focus on this, and where we're talking about obviously HRV being a part of that, but just sort of any suggestions that you have is, I'm challenging people, maybe not thinking about high performance right now, but recovery, because in order to get to high performance, we're going to have to get people healthy again. And just any words of wisdom that you might have for folks knowing just the intense time that we're in right now.
Yeah. The thought that popped into my head, if there is an instrument that could actually bring us closer to, being in that rosy spot you talked about,
Yeah.
1 or 2 years from now, I actually think that HRV training is got to be a part of that. And, I don't mean to be, look at everything through, rose-colored glasses, kind of unrealistic optimist, although I think I am sometimes. I think HRV reasonably is one of those instruments that goes such a long way towards helping us, regulate together. We can recover together, we can regulate together, we can do better together. And the way to motivate yourself, or your spouse or your team to take part in this. One thing that works for me is look at it as an experiment, because, if people are going, I'm going to have to spend 20 minutes a day doing this for the rest of my life. I don't know if that's worth it, because I don't really know whether this is going to pay off. I don't really know what this is going to do for me. If you treat it as an experiment, let's say, you commit to doing this for the next 3 weeks. 3 weeks, we can do lots of things for, only 3 weeks. It's very time limited, heck, if necessary, make it a week. But make it time limited and very specific time limit. Do this for that week or 2 or 3 weeks and see what happens at the end of 3 weeks. If at the end of 3 weeks, you feel no benefit and then, the 20 minutes are just not worth it, well, I'll leave you alone. But whenever I've convinced people to do this experiment, it's actually very rare that people come back and say, nah, it wasn't worth it. Yeah. Most of the time, I probably, 98, 99% of the time, people come back and say, you know what, I did get quite a bit out of it. Do people after that just, do 20 minutes a day, every day for the rest of their lives? Probably not. But that kind of experiment does help people, get way more engaged in this kind of practice, in this kind of training, in this kind of tracking, and they end up doing it a whole lot more than they would have otherwise. And for some people, it absolutely becomes a daily practice. For the three of us, we had to figure out a way to make this be a daily practice. It wasn't always like that, and it wasn't always clear that it was going to be worth it, right? But at some point, it became clear. So, give yourself an opportunity to see that this is going to be worth your time, and what better way to do it than, well, see for yourself, give yourself that time limited opportunity. And I'll bet for most of us, there is going to be enough of a benefit to continue this.
Yeah, and I think we make a tremendous argument in the book that it's worth the 20 minutes of the workday to support people doing this practice. We make that argument, I think, from probably 10 different directions. One, just the science behind the practice, but also we know that if people think you care about their wellness, it's the number one predictor of engagement. What better way to say is, hey, we want you to have your pre-game or pre-work like warm up At work, because we're getting the benefits of you being primed to perform, and we're showing that we're providing that resource for people to have. And it is, I think, ridiculous, because I made these lists. I don't have 20 minutes. I have 20 minutes. Like I do, and it's the only thing that I would encourage people really to wake up 20 minutes early to do. Really anything else, as Dave and I talk about, sleep has prioritized, except maybe to wake up a little early and do a biofeedback session. So Dave, and I'd love to throw this at you. I know we connected wellness practices and we had some fun. We've talked about this on a previous episode about what we include here. How do we, and falling on things connected through heart rate variability. I know you look at your practice through that kind of holistic health lens. And so I would just kind of get maybe Dave's top few practices about what are maybe some other things that we know support heart rate variability that people can also focus on during at least what Matt's encouraging to be a time of recovery.
Absolutely. And I do want to mention, in regards to that too, is a lot of the feedback that I've gotten on the book is how much people love that at the end of the book, each of us goes through our own routine. And you can see what we do personally to essentially improve our HRV and to make sure that our HRV is going to be as high as it can be, and not because we care about a number on our HRV, but because we know that means our autonomic nervous systems are going to be as adaptable as possible, and we are going to be the best person that we can be as a result of that, right? So anyway, within that, yeah, my favorite things. I'm going to hit this. I'm going to hit this for both of us. Breathing. You have to make sure that you are breathing right. I've spent a lot of time focusing on breathing at night specifically, but breathing throughout the day, making sure that you are breathing properly is going to be a huge piece of that. And Ina actually has a great book that's an awesome resource for that.
Yes.
And then hitting your sleep, making sure that you are prioritizing sleep, that you are allowing for enough of a sleep opportunity, and quality, sufficient sleep, right? That's what we are going for there. And definitely we can refer to past episodes for that. Nutrition is going to be our next biggest thing, nutrition, hydration, and then movement. If you're hitting those things, you're doing some wonderful things for yourself every single day. You're going to see your HRV going up, and those are some of the easiest strategies. And Matt, like you said, if you're using the excuse of you don't have the time, what that means is that you're not prioritizing. That's all that means. It means that you haven't put enough value into yourself, into your own health, into your organization's own health, whatever it may be. So those are some of the bigger things, and without a doubt, we talk about those in the book too.
Awesome. So with that, I want to thank you both. It was a wonderful journey to take with both of you. I did write a book with my wife, but that was a little different than working with two experts that I respect outside the family system that I couldn't make down and sit at our computer and type for a few hours. So it was a wonderful and a huge honor for me to work with you both. And I'm really proud of what we came out with, and the fact that we were able to do it in a way to hopefully meet the challenge of this moment, which again, in my, now 47 years, I've been around on this earth for a while. I think it's really the most challenging time that leaders have ever faced, that just overall with the level of stress, mental health, strain on all of us, that hopefully we were providing folks a tool with this. So again, the name of the book is The Heartbeat of Business, Positioning Heart Rate Variability as a Competitive Advantage. Always feels so good to hold it in your hands after you spent some time writing it. So the print books are pretty much everywhere you buy books, especially if you buy books, Amazon and Barnes and Noble and all those places. We are, and by the time you hear this, it is probably likely that the audiobook is out on Audible. That will also eventually be out on different platforms as well. If you're an Optimal HRV member, reach out to us because we are working to get this integrated into our app where people can access both my initial book on looking at this from a therapeutic trauma-informed perspective, but also this more general business book as well. So if you already have a membership and you're listening to this, reach out. We may send you a PDF of the book for free. So with that said, Ina, Dave, thank you so very much. I feel like I wish I was in a room with you all so we could celebrate this accomplishment in person. But thank you both for going on this journey with us. It was a real honor to get this out to the world with both of your expertise in it.
Thank you, Matt. It's been amazing. I learned a ton from both of you, while writing this book. I think that's been, one of the best parts about it is not only do I have a book, but I also feel like, I've sucked up all this extra knowledge that wouldn't have happened otherwise. So it's been awesome.
Equally. Thank you guys so much. I greatly appreciate the two of you and everybody listening.
Yes, everybody take care, and we'll be back in your feed very soon. So thank you, everybody. Thanks, Dr. Dave and Dr. Hazan.